I never thought I'd be the one to have a run-in with a Karen, but here we are. Last month, I moved into Pinewood Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood with well-maintained lawns and friendly neighbors. Well, mostly friendly. I should have known something was off when I first met Deborah Wilson during the homeowner's orientation meeting. She introduced herself as the HOA board president, with such emphasis that you'd think she was announcing herself as the Queen of England. "We maintain very high standards here at Pinewood," she told me, her eyes scanning my casual attire with obvious disapproval. "I hope you'll take the time to thoroughly review our community guidelines. They're quite extensive." I smiled politely and assured her I would, but I could already tell she had me pegged as a potential troublemaker. Little did I know how quickly I'd become the target of her bizarre crusade. The trouble began last Saturday. I was in my driveway, washing my car and enjoying the warm spring sunshine. My garage door was open as I moved back and forth, grabbing different cleaning supplies. I noticed Deborah power walking down the sidewalk in her matching lavender workout set, phone clutched in hand. She slowed as she approached my house, her gaze fixed on my open garage. "Good morning," I called out, trying to be neighborly despite our awkward first meeting. Deborah stopped abruptly, as if surprised I had addressed her directly. "Oh, yes, morning." She seemed distracted, looking past me into my garage. "I see you have quite a spacious garage there." I nodded, not sure where this was going. 3-car garage, it was one of the selling points of the house. "And you only have 1 car," she stated rather than asked, eyeing my sedan. "That's quite a waste of space, don't you think?" Before I could respond, she continued, "The neighborhood association is hosting our annual spring fundraiser next weekend. We need storage space for the decorations and auction items." I could see where this was heading, but I waited for her to actually ask. "Your garage would be perfect," she declared, as if it were already decided. "We'll need to start bringing things over this Tuesday. I'll let the committee know. They can begin at around 10 in the morning." I blinked, genuinely stunned by her presumption. "I'm sorry, Deborah, but I'm not comfortable with that arrangement. I use my garage for my own storage and projects." Her smile faltered. "It's for the community. Everyone contributes." "I'm happy to contribute in other ways," I offered. "Perhaps I could help with setup or—" No, she cut me off. "We need the space. The other suitable garages are already being used." I stood my ground. "I'm afraid my garage isn't available, but I'd be happy to make a donation to the fundraiser instead." Her expression hardened, friendly pretense evaporating. "This isn't a request. As HOA president, I'm informing you that we need access to your garage for community purposes." Now I was getting irritated. "Deborah, I've reviewed the HOA bylaws thoroughly. There's nothing in there that gives the board the right to commandeer private property. My garage is not community space." Her face flushed red. "We have always used available spaces for community events. This is how things work at Pinewood." "Not with my property," I replied firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish washing my car." I turned back to my task, hoping that would be the end of it. I was wrong. "This is precisely the kind of selfish attitude that ruins communities," she huffed. "You'll be hearing from the board about this." I watched as she stormed away, already tapping furiously on her phone. I had a feeling this wasn't over, but I never expected what happened next. Tuesday morning arrived and I was working from home, enjoying a cup of coffee while answering emails. Around 9:30 I heard vehicles pulling up outside. Curious, I peeked through the blinds to see Deborah directing a group of people unloading boxes from a minivan. They were heading straight for my driveway. I rushed outside, coffee still in hand. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" Deborah turned to me with a smug smile. "Oh, good. You're home. We're a bit early, but we have quite a lot to store." The group of volunteers looked uncomfortable, glancing between Deborah and me with uncertainty. "I told you on Saturday that you don't have permission to use my garage," I stated firmly, blocking the path to my driveway. "Don't be difficult," Deborah snapped. "The board has decided this is the most suitable location. I have a key to access the community lockbox on your garage." I nearly choked on my coffee. There is no community lockbox on my garage and you absolutely do not have a key to my property. This is trespassing and I'm asking you all to leave immediately. The volunteers started to back away, sensing the tension, but Deborah stood her ground. This is ridiculous. The previous owners never made such a fuss. Your garage has been used for community storage for years. Well, I'm not the previous owners, I replied. This is my property and I do not consent to you using it. Please leave now or I will call the police to report trespassing. Deborah's eyes widened in disbelief. You wouldn't dare. I pulled out my phone. Try me. She turned to the now retreating volunteers. Wait, don't leave, she's bluffing. But they continued loading boxes back into the van, clearly wanting no part of this confrontation. Fuming, Deborah marched up to me, invading my personal space. You listen here. I've been running this community for 15 years. Do you have any idea who I am? My husband is on the city council. I don't care if your husband is the president of the United States, I replied calmly. This is my private property and you have no right to it. That's when she did something that left me absolutely stunned. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone and dialed. Yes, hello? I need to report a threatening situation. My name is Deborah Wilson and I'm the president of the Pinewood Estates HOA. One of our residents is becoming aggressive and preventing access to community storage space. My jaw dropped as I realized she was actually calling 911 over this ridiculous situation. I could hear the dispatcher asking questions on the other end. Yes, she's blocking access and threatening me, Deborah continued, glaring at me. I feel unsafe. She could become violent at any moment. The dispatcher must have asked for the address because Deborah promptly gave mine. I couldn't believe what was happening. This woman was filing a false police report because I wouldn't let her use my garage. I decided to stay calm and wait for the police. At least then I'd have official witnesses to this madness. I went back inside my house but left the door open so I could monitor the situation. Deborah remained in my driveway, pacing back and forth while making additional calls. I could hear her rallying reinforcements, calling other board members to come witness my outrageous behavior. Within 15 minutes, 2 police cars pulled up. I stepped outside as the officers approached, one heading toward me and one toward Deborah, who was already rushing to meet them. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she exclaimed. "This woman is preventing access to community property and threatening the HOA board." The officer looked between us. "Ma'am, please calm down. Let's sort this out. What exactly is the dispute here?" I explained the situation calmly. "This is my home. Ms. Wilson wants to use my garage for HOA storage without my permission. When I refused, she brought people to my property anyway, claimed she had a key to my garage, and then called 911 when I asked her to leave." The officer turned to Deborah. "Ma'am, is this private property?" "It's in the HOA community," she insisted. "We have always used available garages for storage. It's implied in the covenant." "May I see the document that grants the HOA access to private garages?" the officer asked. Deborah's confident demeanor faltered. "Well, it's not explicitly stated, but it's understood. We've been doing it for years." The second officer had been reviewing something on the computer in his patrol car and now approached. "Ms. Wilson, we've responded to several calls from this address in the past 2 years, all regarding alleged community violations that turned out to be civil matters, not emergencies." Deborah straightened her posture. Those were legitimate HOA concerns. "Ma'am," the first officer said firmly, "calling 911 for a civil dispute over property access is misuse of emergency services. Additionally, entering or attempting to enter someone's property without their consent constitutes trespassing." The color drained from Deborah's face. "I am the HOA president. I was simply—" "Being HOA president doesn't give you the right to enter private property without permission," the officer interrupted. "The homeowner has asked you to leave. I suggest you comply immediately." I could see Deborah processing this unexpected turn of events. She clearly wasn't used to having her authority questioned, especially not by law enforcement. "Furthermore," the officer continued, "you stated that the homeowner was threatening and potentially violent. That appears to be a false report based on what we're observing." She threatened to call the police, Deborah protested. Warning someone that you'll call the police if they trespass is not a threat, ma'am. It's a statement of intent to pursue legal remedies. By this point, several neighbors had emerged from their homes, watching the scene unfold. Among them were two people wearing Pinewood HOA board badges who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation. The officer turned to me. "Would you like to press charges for attempted trespassing?" Deborah gasped. "You can't be serious. This is absurd." I considered my options. While part of me wanted to see her face consequences for her actions, I also had to live in this community. Not at this time, I decided. I just want it clearly established that my property is off limits without my explicit permission. The officer nodded, then addressed Deborah again. "Ms. Wilson, consider this an official warning. Misuse of emergency services can result in fines up to $1,000 and potential criminal charges in our jurisdiction. Additionally, the homeowner would be within their rights to seek a restraining order if this behavior continues." One of the other board members finally approached. "Deborah, we need to go. We can use the community center for storage as discussed in last month's meeting." Deborah whirled around. "What? We agreed?" "No, you decided," the board member corrected quietly. "The rest of us suggested the community center, but you insisted this garage would be better." The look of betrayal on Deborah's face was almost comical. She seemed to realize she was quickly losing control of the narrative and her audience. "This isn't over," she hissed at me before stomping toward her car. The officers stayed until Deborah and her remaining supporters had left my property. They gave me their cards and recommended I document any further incidents. As it turned out, I didn't have to wait long for the next chapter in the saga. That evening I received an email from the HOA board. It was a notice of an emergency board meeting to address recent community disruptions. I was specifically invited to attend to discuss my actions. I arrived at the community center the following evening to find it packed with residents. Apparently, word had spread about the confrontation, and everyone wanted to see the showdown. Deborah sat at the head table, looking simultaneously smug and agitated. As the meeting began, she wasted no time painting herself as the victim. "As you all know, I've dedicated 15 years to making Pinewood Estates the prestigious community it is today. Yesterday, while attempting to organize our annual fundraiser, I was met with hostility and threats from a new resident who clearly doesn't understand our community values." I noticed several residents exchanging glances. It seemed not everyone was buying her version of events. "Furthermore," Deborah continued, "this resident had the audacity to involve law enforcement in a simple community matter, wasting valuable public resources and embarrassing the board." That's when I decided to speak up. "Excuse me, but wasn't it you who called 911 because I wouldn't let you use my garage?" The room went silent. Deborah's face flushed. "I called because you were behaving aggressively." "Actually," came a voice from the back, "I have the police report right here." A man stood up, holding some papers. I recognized him as my next-door neighbor, who happened to be a retired attorney. I requested it this morning out of concern since I witnessed the incident. It clearly states that Ms. Wilson called 911 to report a homeowner who was preventing access to what she termed community storage space, which was in fact private property. The report also notes potential misuse of emergency services. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Another board member cleared his throat. "Deborah, is this true? Did you try to use her garage without permission and then call 911 when she refused?" "It wasn't like that," Deborah insisted, but her voice had lost its authoritative edge. "The previous owners always allowed us to use that garage." She was being unreasonable. "The previous owners moved because of you, Deborah," someone called out. "They told us at their going-away party." More voices joined in, and suddenly it seemed like the floodgates had opened. Residents began sharing their own stories of Deborah's overreach, arbitrary fines, personal vendettas disguised as covenant enforcement, using her position to benefit her friends while strictly enforcing rules against those she disliked. The meeting quickly spiraled beyond Deborah's control. Another board member took over, calling for order and suggesting they address the immediate issue. I move that we issue a formal apology to our new neighbor and clarify that the HOA has no right to access private garages or any private property without explicit owner consent, he proposed. I second that motion, another board member quickly added. Furthermore, my attorney neighbor interjected, I recommend the board consider whether Ms. Wilson's actions constitute a violation of the board's own ethics policy, particularly regarding abuse of position and misrepresentation of authority. Deborah looked stunned. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for this community. The board called for a vote among its members. To Deborah's visible horror, they unanimously agreed to both the apology and an ethics review of her actions. Given the severity of misrepresenting HOA authority to police and attempting to access private property without permission, I move that Deborah Wilson step down as board president pending the ethics review, one member proposed. Deborah shot to her feet. This is a coup. You can't remove me. I built this community. According to our bylaws, we absolutely can, the same member countered calmly. And we're not removing you yet. We're asking you to temporarily step down during the investigation. Another vote was called, and again the result was unanimous, with only Deborah herself dissenting. The interim president took over the meeting and addressed me directly. On behalf of the Pinewood Estates, HOA, I sincerely apologize for this incident. I assure you that this behavior does not represent our community values, and we will take steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. Deborah sat rigid in her chair, face flushed with anger and humiliation. As the meeting concluded and people began to disperse, she finally spoke, her voice trembling with rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? She hissed at me. 15 years of my life dedicated to this community, and you've destroyed my reputation in less than a week. I shook my head. I didn't destroy anything, Deborah. I simply didn't let you use my garage. The following week, I received official notice that the ethics review had been completed. Deborah had been permanently removed from the board, required to pay a $500 fine for misuse of HOA resources, and the board had reported her misuse of emergency services to the city, resulting in an additional $750 fine. As I read the letter detailing these consequences, I happened to glance out my window to see Deborah standing at the edge of my property, staring at my house with an expression of pure disbelief, the official letter clutched in her shaking hand.